June 18th, 1944. The dust has a taste. I never thought I'd write that down, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. It's a gritty metallic taste that settles on your tongue and at the back of your throat. A mix of churned up French soil, pulverized stone, and something else. Something I don't like to think about too much. It's the taste of this place, of this field hospital they've named Cheers for Chars, a silly, brave little name for a collection of canvas tents pitched in a muddy field that is anything but cheerful. My name is Margaret O'Connor, but everyone back home in Cedar Rapids called me Peggy. Here, I'm just Nurse. It's easier that way. I'm sitting on my cot, my knees pulled up to use as a desk, a small pocket diary open in front of me. The light is fading, that long, slow English summer twilight that feels all wrong for the chaos of the last few weeks. We're in France now, just inland from the beaches they're calling Omaha and Utah. The sound of the big guns is a constant, low thunder in the distance, a reminder that the world is still breaking apart just a few miles from here. I'm writing this by the glow of a single kerosene lamp, its soft hiss a companionable sound in the relative quiet of the evening. The day's heat is finally letting go, replaced by a cool dampness that seeps up from the ground and through the canvas floor of the tent. I share this space with 3 other nurses, Helen, Ruth, and Mary-Beth. They're asleep now, they're breathing a soft, tired rhythm. Mary-Beth sometimes talks in her sleep, murmuring about medications and dressings. We all do, I think. I wasn't sure I'd keep a diary. It felt like a foolish thing to pack, next to the rolls of gauze and the vials of morphine. But my mother slipped it into my bag, a small leather-bound book with blank-lined pages. "To keep you grounded, Peggy," she'd said, her voice thick with that worry she tried so hard to hide. "To remind you of who you are. I think I understand now. In this sea of uniforms and pain and orders, this little book is my own private piece of shore. It's where I can be Peggy again, if only for a few minutes. Today was, well, it was a day. They all blend together, a relentless parade of ambulances, of stretchers carried by tired-eyed men, of the sharp, clean smell of antiseptic, trying and failing to mask the scent of blood and earth and sweat. My hands are raw from scrubbing, the nails short and practical. My uniform, a once starchy dress, is permanently stained with patches of brown and rust. But it's not the big things I want to remember tonight. It's the small ones. It's the way the morning mist hangs over the hedgerows, turning the world soft and ghostly before the sun burns it away. It's the taste of the bitter, life-giving coffee we drink from tin mugs. It's the sound of a boy from Kansas whispering, "Thank you, ma'am," after you've given him a sip of water. He couldn't have been more than 19. His face was pale under the grime, but his eyes were clear and grateful. We lost him this afternoon. His name was Private Daniel Miller. I wrote it down on his tag myself. I don't know why that feels so important, but it does. Writing his name made him a person, not just a casualty. He had a mother in Wichita, he told me. He'd promised to write to her every day. I wonder if he had a little diary, too. That's the part they don't tell you about in the training manuals. It's not just the patching up. It's the being there. It's holding a hand. It's reading a letter aloud when a boy's vision is too blurry with pain to focus. It's being the last friendly face someone sees. You build a shell around your heart, a professional sort of distance, but these little moments, they find the cracks. They always do. Major Henderson, our chief surgeon, is a rock. A gruff, brilliant man from Boston with hands that can be as steady as a statue's one moment and as gentle as a mother's the next. I saw him today after a long, difficult surgery, just standing outside the OR tent, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. He was just staring at his hands. He didn't know I was there. After a minute, he took a deep, shuddering breath, straightened his back, and walked back inside, his voice already calling for the next case. We all have our ways of coping. Helen, the nurse on the cot next to mine, copes by talking about her fiancé Robert. She describes their wedding plans in exquisite detail, the lace on her dress, the flavor of the cake, the song for their first dance. It's her way of building a future to look forward to, a beacon of normalcy in all this madness. Ruth is quieter, more practical. She's from a farm in Wisconsin and has a no-nonsense approach to everything, including death. It's a part of life, Peggy, she told me once, her voice calm. We're just seeing more of it than most, and sooner than we ought to. Mary-Beth, the youngest of us, still cries sometimes when the lights are out. We all pretend not to hear. The sounds of the hospital are a constant symphony. There's the low groan of a generator, the rustle of the tent canvas in the wind, the occasional moan from the recovery ward, the clipped, professional voices of the doctors and orderlies, and underneath it all, that ever-present rumble from the front. You get used to it. The silence, when it comes, is somehow more frightening. I should try to sleep. The ambulances will start rolling in again before dawn. A fresh delivery of broken boys from the front lines. We'll be ready. We have to be. But for now, in this little pool of lamplight, with the sound of my friends breathing around me, I can just be Peggy, a long way from home, writing in a little book, trying to make sense of it all. June 22nd, 1944. The rain started last night. Not a gentle, soothing rain, but a cold, insistent drizzle that turns the ground into a thick, sucking mud. It finds its way into everything, your boots, your blankets, the seams of the tents. Everything feels damp and heavy. The air smells of wet canvas and damp wool, and that ever-present tinge of disinfectant. We had a brief respite from new arrivals this morning, a lull that allowed us to catch our breaths and tend to the patients we already have. I was changing the dressings on a young lieutenant from the 101st Airborne. He'd taken shrapnel in his leg during the drop. His name is Lieutenant James, but he insists I call him Paul. He has a quiet, thoughtful manner about him that seems at odds with the screaming eagle patch on his shoulder. Nurse Peggy, he said, his voice a low murmur as I worked. You ever been to New York? I told him I hadn't. Cedar Rapids was the biggest city I'd ever known until I shipped out. I'm from Buffalo, he said, his gaze fixed on the roof of the tent. But after all this is over, I'm going to move to the city. Manhattan. I'm going to get a job in a skyscraper. Can you imagine? Looking out a window 30 stories up, and all you see is buildings and people in life. No mud. No. Know this. I finished securing the bandage. It sounds wonderful, Paul. He looked at me then, his eyes earnest. It will be. I'll take my girl, Abigail. We'll see a show on Broadway. We'll eat at one of those fancy restaurants where they bring the food under a silver dome. He smiled, a small, private thing. I write to her about it. I tell her to start looking for an apartment, something with a view of the park. It's these conversations that keep you going. You become a part of their dreams for a moment, a witness to the future they're fighting to get back to. It's a heavy responsibility, but a beautiful one. This afternoon, during the lull, Major Henderson asked me to help him organize some of the supplies that had been hastily dumped in a storage tent near the back of the compound. The tent was a jumble of crates marked with red crosses, stacked boxes of plasma, and rolled-up blankets. The rain drummed a steady, lonely rhythm on the canvas roof. We need to make some sense of this mess, Nurse O'Connor, the major said, his voice brusque. See if you can find some sort of system. I'll be in the OR if you need me. And so I found myself alone in the dim, crowded tent, surrounded by the ghostly shapes of supplies under their dusty tarps. It was quiet, a world away from the usual hum of the hospital. I started with the crates, checking their contents against a faded manifest I'd found clipped to a board. Bandages, sulfa powder, more bandages. It was methodical, almost meditative work. In the far corner, tucked behind a stack of empty ammunition boxes that were being repurposed as makeshift shelves, I saw an old, splintered wooden crate that didn't seem to belong with the modern, standardized Army-issue supplies. It looked civilian, Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled it out, the wood rough against my fingers. It was heavier than I expected. There was no lid, just a dusty canvas cloth stretched over the top and tied down with a piece of frayed rope. I untied it, the knot coming loose with a dry rasp. And that's when I saw them, letters. The crate was filled to the brim with letters. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They were in a state of disarray, some still in their original envelopes, many just loose sheets of paper folded and refolded so many times the creases were soft and worn. They were all different thin, fragile-looking airmail paper, thicker stationery, pages torn from notebooks like my own. My breath caught in my throat. I reached in and picked up a handful. The paper felt dry and delicate, like old leaves. I could see a variety of handwritings, some neat and precise, some a messy, hurried scrawl. I saw dates from the past few months, May, early June, names and serial numbers. To my dearest Mary, one began. Hello from sunny England. Another started, irony of the greeting hitting me like a physical blow. These weren't official documents. These were the personal letters of soldiers. Their private thoughts, their fears, their love, their hopes. But why were they here? Why were they bundled together in this forgotten crate in a storage tent? I sat back on my heels, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. This was a treasure trove, a vault of secrets, a collection of voices that had been silenced or lost. I felt like an archaeologist who had just stumbled upon a lost tomb. This was sacred ground. I knew I shouldn't be reading them. It felt like an invasion of privacy, the deepest kind. But as I held that first letter to dearest Mary in my hand, I felt a pull, a responsibility. These words were meant to be read. They were meant to be delivered. They were a connection to home, a lifeline. The fact that they were here, abandoned, felt like a profound wrong. I carefully sorted through a few more. Not reading, just looking. I saw a letter with a small, childish drawing of a house and a tree tucked inside. I saw another that was stained with a dark, rusty brown patch that I knew wasn't mud. My throat tightened. This was more than just lost mail. This was a piece of the war I hadn't seen before. Not the strategy or the heroics, but the quiet human heart of it. These were the stories that never made it into the dispatches, the words that were whispered in the dark before a battle, or scribbled down in a moment of respite. They were the most honest things I had ever seen. I knew I couldn't leave them here. I couldn't let them rot in this damp tent, forgotten. I had to do something. But what? Turn them over to the harried postal officer who was already drowning in a sea of official mail. It felt like they would just get lost in the system again. A thought began to form in my mind, a crazy, impossible thought. What if I could get them sent? What if I could find a way to deliver them myself? The logistics were daunting, insane even. But looking at that crate, at all those unspoken words, it felt like a calling. I heard footsteps squelching in the mud outside and quickly pulled the canvas back over the crate, my heart thumping guiltily. It was just Corporal Evans, one of the orderlies, Nurse O'Connor. Major Henderson needs you in the OR. Ambulances are 5 minutes out. The real world came crashing back in. I'll be right there, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm. He nodded and left. I looked back at the crate, a silent, dark shape in the corner. The mystery of it hung in the air. Where did they come from? Who did they belong to? So many stories waiting in the dark. I stood up, brushed the dust from my knees, and took a deep breath. The wounded were coming. There was work to be done. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would be back. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. June 25th, 1944. The days have begun to take on a strange, dual quality. There is the world of the hospital, the immediate, urgent, and often brutal reality of triage and surgery and recovery. The scent of blood and antiseptic, the feel of a feverish brow under my palm, the sound of a saw in the OR tent. It is a world that demands all of you, every ounce of your focus and strength and compassion. And then there is the world of the letters. I've moved the crate. It felt too exposed in the storage tent, too vulnerable to being tossed aside or repurposed during one of our frantic supply searches. So, during another quiet moment yesterday with Corporal Evans' reluctant help, I had to promise him my sugar ration for a week. We shifted it to a more secluded spot, a small, disused lean-to behind the laundry tent. It's dry there, and more importantly, it's private. I haven't had much time to delve into them. Just a few minutes here and there, stolen moments before sleep or during a meal break. I don't read them properly, not yet. It still feels like I'm intruding. Instead, I've started to gently sort them. It's a way to be near them, to understand the scale of this find without violating the trust within them. I sort them by date as best I can. Many are from May, the tense waiting period before the invasion. The handwriting in those is often tighter, more controlled, full of a forced cheerfulness. The food here is swell, one boy wrote, a Private Jenkins. Better than my mom's cooking, but don't you dare tell her I said that. You can almost feel him trying to shield the person on the other end from his fear. Then there are the ones from early June, the tone shifts. The writing is often more hurried, sometimes shaky. The paper is different, dirtier, sometimes water-stained. These are the letters written in the field, in foxholes, in the brief, terrifying lulls of the first days of the invasion. It's louder than you can possibly imagine, one unknown soldier wrote. The sentence is alone in the middle of the page, as if he started to describe it and then gave up, the words failing him. And then there are the ones from here, from this very hospital. I can tell because some are written on the same kind of thin yellow paper we give to the ambulatory patients. These are the hardest to look at. These are the if you get this letter kind of letters, the final thoughts, the last words. I found one this evening tucked inside a battered copy of The Great Gatsby. The book itself was a surprise. The letter was folded into a tight, small square, as if he wanted to make it as tiny and insignificant as possible. I almost didn't unfold it. It felt too personal, too final. But something compelled me. The handwriting was elegant, sloping. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I have asked Nurse O'Connor to post it for me. Isn't that a strange thought? That my words are reaching you from a hand other than my own? They tell me I will be fine, that the fever is breaking, but a man can feel these things, I think. There is a hollowness inside me that the medicine cannot fill. I do not regret a single day that led me to you. Do you remember the afternoon we spent by the lake, the summer before I shipped out? The water was so still it looked like glass. You wore a blue dress, the color of the sky just before twilight. I think of that more than I think of the fighting. I carry that picture of you in my mind, a perfect, quiet moment. That is the world we are fighting for, Ellie. A world of blue dresses and still lakes. Tell Father I tried my best, and tell Mother not to weep. A life that contained you, even for a short time, was a life more full than any man has a right to ask for. With all my love, now and always, Thomas, I had to put the letter down. My hands were trembling. Thomas? I didn't know Thomas. He must have been here before I arrived, or perhaps in a different ward. He mentioned me by name, or at least a Nurse O'Connor. Was it me, or was there another? The thought that he had entrusted his final words to one of us, to a stranger, and that they had ended up here in this crate, it was heartbreaking. He'd asked for the letter to be posted. He'd given it to a nurse, but it never was. Why? What happened? Did the nurse forget? Was she overwhelmed? Was she killed? The questions swirled in my head, a dizzying, sad whirlwind. This wasn't just a collection of lost mail. This was a collection of broken promises, of unfulfilled last requests. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders, heavier than any crate of medical supplies. I showed the letter to Helen tonight after our shift. I had to share it with someone. We sat on our cots, the lamp between us, and I handed her the fragile page. She read it slowly, her lips moving slightly with the words. When she finished, she was silent for a long time, just staring at the paper. "Oh, Peggy," she finally whispered, her voice thick. "The poor man. And his poor Eleanor. What do I do, Helen?" I asked, my own voice small. This is too big." She looked at me, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "You have to try, Peggy. You have to try and send them. It's what he wanted. It's what they all wanted. But how? There are so many, and we're in the middle of a war. The Postal Service is a nightmare. We'll find a way," she said, with a determination I rarely saw in her. This was different from planning her wedding. This was real. We'll ask the chaplain. We'll ask the major. We'll stuff them in our pockets and mail them one by one when we get back to England. We have to. Her conviction was infectious. It solidified my own resolve. This was no longer just a curiosity, a historical artifact. This was a mission. A quiet, personal mission amidst the grand, violent one happening all around us. Later, as I tried to sleep, the words of Thomas's letter echoed in my mind. A world of blue dresses and still lakes. That's what this was all about, wasn't it? Not flags or politics, but the simple, profound right for a young man to remember his girl in a blue dress, and for that girl to know she was remembered. I have to find a way to get this letter to Eleanor. I have to find a way to get all of them home. I don't know how yet, but I will. For Thomas. For Daniel Miller. For all of them. June 28th, 1944. The rain has finally stopped, leaving the world washed clean and steaming under a pale, hesitant sun. The mud is beginning to firm up, and the air smells fresh of wet grass and damp earth. It's a welcome change. Morale, which had sunk into the mud with the weather, seems to be lifting just a little. I spoke with Major Henderson today. One chose my moment carefully, approaching him after he'd finished his rounds and was enjoying a rare, quiet cup of coffee outside the OR tent. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than ever, but his gaze was calm. "Nurse O'Connor," he said, nodding. "What can I do for you?" My heart was thumping. I clutched the letter from Thomas tightly in my pocket. "Sir, I wanted to ask you about something I found." In the storage tent, I told him about the crate. I described it, the disarray of letters, the dates. I was careful not to sound accusatory, just curious, concerned. I didn't mention that I'd moved it. He listened, sipping his coffee, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he let out a long, slow breath. "Ah, that crate." He looked out towards the hedgerows, his eyes distant. "That's been following this unit around since training back in Wiltshire." "Following you, sir?" "It's a long story, nurse, a sad one." He took another sip. "The man who was our chief clerk before the invasion, a fellow named Abernathy, was a bit of a magpie, a hoarder. He had a soft heart, too soft for this job, perhaps. He started collecting letters from the boys that, for one reason or another, never got sent. Sometimes the soldier was moved to another hospital before he could post it. Sometimes the soldier didn't make it. Abernathy couldn't bear to just throw them away. He said they were the most important things these boys owned. He kept them, meaning to track down the families, to forward them on. He had a whole system, or so he claimed. What happened to him? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Major Henderson's jaw tightened. He was killed. The first day we landed, a stray shell hit the beachhead where we were setting up the initial aid station. He was gone before we even got a proper hospital established. He looked at me, his eyes full of old, weary grief. In the chaos, his personal effects, including that crate, got bundled up with the medical supplies. We've been dragging it around with us ever since. I suppose I should have done something with it, but there never seems to be time. And it felt like his project. Throwing it out felt like a betrayal. So that was it. A kind man with a kind heart, killed before he could finish his self-appointed task. The crate was his legacy, abandoned and forgotten. Sir, I said, my voice firm now, I'd like to take over. I'd like to try and get these letters sent. He studied me for a long moment, his sharp doctor's eyes taking in my face. That's a monumental task, nurse. We're at war. The Army Postal Service is a miracle of logistics, but it's overstretched. Letters get lost, even when they're properly handed in. These are a ghost army of letters. I understand that, sir, but they deserve a chance. The men who wrote them deserve that much. He was quiet again, then gave a short, decisive nod. All right, consider it your special project. Outside of your regular duties, of course. I'll speak to the new clerk, see if we can get some official envelopes, some postage. But I can't promise anything. You'll be mostly on your own. Thank you, sir, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. That's all I can ask for. As I turned to go, he called after me. Nurse O'Connor? Yes, sir. Abernathy would have appreciated this. He was a good man. He gave me a faint, sad smile. Don't let it break your heart. I walked away, the permission feeling both like a victory and a heavy new weight. I was official now. This was my duty. My special project. The words echoed in my head as I went back to my rounds. Later, I went to my lean-to. I looked at the crate with new eyes. It wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a story. It was Corporal Abernathy's story, a man I would never meet, but whose work I was now continuing. I felt a strange connection to him, this fellow collector of last words. I decided to start with Thomas's letter. It felt like the most urgent. I took it back to my tent and, on a fresh piece of my own diary paper, I wrote a short note to accompany it. To the family of Thomas, I am a nurse with the 42nd Field Hospital. I found this letter among the personal effects of a patient. I did not have the privilege of knowing Thomas, but his words speak of a brave and loving man. It is my sincere hope that this letter finds its way to you and brings you some small measure of comfort. With deepest sympathy, Nurse Margaret O'Connor. It felt inadequate. What words could ever be enough? But it was something. It was a bridge. I folded my note, placed it with Thomas's letter in a fresh Army issue envelope, and wrote, "To the family of Thomas" on the front. I didn't have a last name. I didn't have an address. This was the first, and perhaps the biggest, obstacle. How do you find one Thomas in all of America? Or England? Or Canada? He could be from anywhere. The task suddenly seemed impossible. The sheer scale of it threatened to overwhelm me before I had even begun. But then I thought of the blue dress. The still leg I had to try. For Thomas, for Eleanor, for Corporal Abernathy. I slipped the envelope into the pocket of my uniform. I would carry it with me. It would be a reminder, the first of many, the first step on an impossible journey. July 2nd, 1944. The heat has returned with a vengeance. The inside of the tents becomes an oven by midday, the air thick and heavy. We sweat through our uniforms, and the patients are miserable, fanning themselves with whatever they can find. The flies are a constant nuisance, and we are forever shooing them away from wounds and food alike. My mission with the letters has hit its first major wall: information. A letter with just a first name is a dead end. I need more to go on. I've started to go through the crate more systematically now, during my breaks. I'm not just sorting by date. I'm looking for clues. Full names, serial numbers, home addresses, unit designations. It's slow, painstaking work. Some of the handwriting is a challenge to decipher. Some of the letters are so personal, so raw, that I have to put them down and walk away for a moment, my eyes stinging. I feel like a ghost, hovering at the edges of 100 different lives. I found a letter today from a boy who was clearly terrified. His name was Patrick, from Chicago. He wrote to his brother, Mike, I'm scared. There, I said it. I can't say it to anyone else. The guys would rip me something awful. But it's the noise, Mike. It never stops. And waiting. I think the waiting might be worse than the actual fighting. My hands won't stop shaking as I write this. Don't tell Ma. Tell her I'm doing fine. That I saw the Eiffel Tower, I didn't. And that the French girls are pretty, they are, but I'm too scared to even talk to one. I just want to come home and work at the garage with you and Dad. I won't ever complain about the smell of gasoline again. I promise. He signed it. Your little brother, Pat? I wonder what happened to Patrick. Did he make it? Is he still out there in a foxhole somewhere, thinking about his dad's garage? Or is his name on a casualty list somewhere? The not knowing is its own special kind of agony. I've started a new list in the back of my diary. I'm writing down every name, every serial number, every possible piece of information I can find. It's my ledger of the lost and the waiting. Thomas is at the top of the list, a question mark next to his name. I shared my frustration with Ruth today while we were sterilizing instruments in the big boiling pots. The steam was fogging up her glasses, but she listened intently. You need a system, Peggy, she said in her practical farm girl way. You can't just hope to stumble on an address. You need to cross-reference. Cross-reference with what? I asked, wiping sweat from my forehead. With the patient admission ledgers, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The clerks keep them. Every soldier who comes through here is logged in. Name, serial number, unit, injury, disposition. Whether they were sent back to the line, transferred to a general hospital, or... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. It was a brilliant, simple idea. Why hadn't I thought of it? The admission ledgers were the key. If I could find Thomas in the ledger, I could get his full name and serial number. With that, I could potentially find his unit. With his unit, I could find his home address through the Army records. It was a long shot. The ledgers from the first chaotic days on the beach were probably a mess. And the clerk, a young, perpetually flustered PFC named Davis, was notoriously protective of his paperwork. But it was a place to start, a real tangible lead. Ruth, you're a genius, I said. She shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. It's just common sense. You've got the what. Now you need the who. The ledger connects the two. After our shift, I muster my courage and approach the clerk's tent. PFC Davis was there, surrounded by stacks of paper and a typewriter that looked like it had been through the war itself. Nurse, he said, not looking up from a form he was filling out in triplicate. What can I do for you? I explained my project with Major Henderson's blessing. I told him about the crate, about Corporal Abernathy, about Thomas's letter. I showed him the envelope. I just need to look through the old admission ledgers, I finished. From early June, I'm trying to find a patient named Thomas. Davis stopped writing and looked at me, his expression a mixture of skepticism and pity. Nurse O'Connor, with all due respect, those ledgers are a nightmare. Half the entries are in pencil, the handwriting is awful, and half the time in the first week we didn't get more than a last name and a wound description before they were shipped out. It's not a library. It's a chronicle of chaos. I understand, I said, trying to keep my voice even and pleasant. I'm not asking you to do it. I'm just asking for permission to look. I'll be careful. I won't disrupt your system. He sighed, a long-suffering sound. He was a boy doing a man's job, and he was drowning in it. Fine, but you do it here. In this tent, the ledgers don't leave. And you put everything back exactly where you found it. And for heaven's sake, don't get any blood on them. He gestured to a rickety table in the corner, piled high with thick ledger-style books bound in dark green canvas. Thank you, PFC Davis, I said, my heart lifting. Thank you so much. And so, another layer was added to my dual existence. Nurse by day, archival detective by night. I sat down at the table, the heavy ledger for the first week of June feeling like a tombstone in my hands. I opened it. PFC Davis was not exaggerating. It was chaos rendered in ink and pencil. Names were scrawled, misspelled, smudged. Serial numbers were incomplete. Units were listed by nicknames or abbreviations I didn't understand. GSW leg, shrapnel, chest, blast concussion. The clinical terms belied the human suffering they represented. I started on the date I estimated Thomas would have been here based on his letter. I went page by page, my finger tracing down the columns, my eyes straining in the dim light. Smith, Jones, Williams, Carter, O'Malley. So many names, so many stories. I saw the name Daniel Miller and my breath hitched. I remembered his pale, young face. I kept going. The smell of the tent dry paper, ink, and dust filled my nostrils. The sound of Davis typing, a clumsy staccato rhythm, was the soundtrack to my search. An hour passed, then another. My eyes grew tired. I found a Thomas P., but the unit was listed as Eng Corp., which didn't seem to fit the man who wrote with such poetry. I found a T.T. Wallace, but the disposition was Kia. My heart sank. I hoped it wasn't him. Just as I was about to give up for the night, May finger stopped on an entry near the bottom of a page from June 9th. Last name, Cavendish. First name, Thomas, rank, lieutenant. Serial number, 10,876,532. Unit, 506th Pier, 101st Airborne. Injury, sepsis secondary to GSW abdomen. Disposition, transferred to 217th General Hospital, UK, the 12th of June. My breath caught in my throat. Thomas Cavendish. A lieutenant, a paratrooper with the 101st. It had to be him. The date fit, the injury sepsis, a fever fit with his letter. He hadn't died here. He was transferred. He had a chance. I found him, I whispered, the words feeling like a prayer. PFC Davis looked up from his typewriter. You're kidding. Thomas Cavendish. Transferred to the 217th General Hospital. Davis nodded slowly, a flicker of respect in his eyes. All right, that's something. With the name and serial number, you can submit a request through channels to the records department. They can get you a next of kin address. He made it sound simple, though I knew it was anything, but it was a path. A real path. I carefully copied the information into my diary, my hand trembling with excitement. Thomas Cavendish. He was no longer a ghost. He was a man with a name, a rank, a unit. He had a history. I closed the heavy ledger, a sense of profound accomplishment washing over me. It was just one name, one letter. But it was a start. It was proof that this impossible task might not be so impossible after all. As I walked back to my tent in the gathering darkness, the stars beginning to prick the deep blue sky, I felt a new kind of hope. It was small and fragile, but it was there. I had found Thomas. Now I had to find Eleanor. And I knew with a certainty that warmed me against the cool night air that this was just the beginning. There were hundreds more letters in that crate, hundreds more voices waiting to be heard, and I was going to listen to every single one. July 5th, 1944. The heat broke last night with a sudden, violent thunderstorm. It felt like the sky itself was cracking open. The lightning flashes lit up the inside of our tent in stark white bursts, and the thunder was so loud it seemed to shake the very ground we were sleeping on. For a few hours, it was louder than the war. This morning, the air is cool and clean again, washed fresh. The world smells of ozone and wet grass, a blessed relief. I woke up with a sense of purpose I haven't felt in weeks. It's because of Thomas Cavendish. Having a full name, a serial number, it makes him real in a way he wasn't before. He's no longer just a voice on a page. He's Lieutenant Thomas Cavendish of the 506th. I carried that knowledge with me all through the morning rounds, a small bright secret tucked away next to my heart. I went back to PFC Davis first thing, armed with the information from the ledger. He was, if possible, even more buried in paperwork than before. Davis, I found him. Thomas Cavendish. I have his serial number right here, I said, holding out my diary. He peered at the number, then at a new intimidating stack of forms on his desk. Right. Well, the way you do it is you fill out a request for personnel information. Form DREP 202. You need to state your official reason for the request. He pushed a carbon paper form towards me. Major Henderson's authorization will have to be on it. The form was covered in tiny boxes and legalese. My heart sank a little. Of course it wouldn't be simple. Nothing in the Army ever is. What reason do I put? Well, you can't just say curiosity, Nurse O'Connor, he said, a touch of his old sarcasm returning. It has to be official business, maybe resolution of deceased patient's personal effects. That usually works. But he's not deceased, I said, a little too quickly. He was transferred. Davis shrugged. The records department doesn't know that, and it's the only reason they'll process for a nurse. They won't just hand out next of kin information for any old reason. It has to be for the disposition of effects. It felt like a lie. A small, bureaucratic lie, but a lie nonetheless. I was going to have to use the presumption of Thomas's death to find his family. The irony was bitter. I nodded slowly. I understand. I'll get the major's signature. I spent my lunch break filling out the form, my handwriting neat and precise in the little boxes. Cavendish Thomas, 10,876,532. Reason for request, resolution of personal effects. I felt a pang of guilt writing those words. I was essentially telling the vast impersonal army machinery that he was gone just to learn where he came from. Major Henderson signed it without question, just a grunt and a quick scrawl of his pen. Keep me posted, nurse, he said, and that was that. Now the form sits in my diary, waiting to be handed back to Davis for official submission. It feels like I've launched a message in a bottle into a vast bureaucratic ocean. Who knows how long it will take to get a reply, if I ever get one. In the meantime, I've returned to the crate. Thomas's letter was the key that unlocked the door, but there is a whole house full of rooms behind it. Now, when I read the other letters, I do so with a new eye. I'm not just a reader anymore. I'm an investigator. I'm looking for clues, for connections, for anything that can help me piece together the stories. I found a letter today from a boy who talked about his dog, a collie named Shep who could hear the whistle of a train from 3 miles away. He described how Shep would wait for him by the gate every afternoon when he came home from school. The letter was to his mother. Tell Shep I miss him, he wrote, and save me some of your apple pie. It was signed your son, Billy. No last name. No serial number, just Billy, another ghost. But now, I feel a responsibility to Billy too. I have to try. Helen has become my unofficial partner in this. She sits with me sometimes in the lean-to, her own tiredness forgotten as she helps me sort. She has a good eye for detail. Look at this one, Peggy, she said this evening, holding up a letter written on a piece of paper that looked like it had been torn from a map. He talks about his unit. The boys in Charlie Company are holding up, and he mentions a Sergeant O'Rourke. That's something, isn't it? It was something. It was more than I had for Billy and his dog. We started a new page in my diary ledger, Charlie Company, SGT O'Rourke. It's a thread, however thin. It's strange how this project has changed the way I see the hospital. Every patient who comes in now is not just a wound to be treated, but a life, a story. They all have people who love them, waiting for a letter. I find myself talking to them more, asking little questions about home. Not prying, just listening. I asked a young private from Texas today if he had a dog. His face lit up, and he told me all about a coonhound named Duke. For a few minutes, he wasn't in a hospital cot in France. He was back on his porch in Lubbock with Duke's head on his knee. It's a small thing, but it feels important. Ruth thinks I'm getting too emotionally involved. You can't carry all their stories, Peggy, she told me gently as we folded linens. You'll wear yourself to a nub. She's probably right, but I don't know how to do it any other way. To me, it's not a burden, it's an honor. To be trusted with these last, most private thoughts. To be the keeper of these quiet messages. It feels like the most important nursing I've ever done. The crate, which once seemed like a sad, forgotten relic, now feels like a living, breathing thing. It hums with the energy of all those unspoken words. It's my secret library of hopes and fears, and I am its librarian. I wonder what Thomas Cavendish is doing right now. Is he in a clean bed in England? Is his fever gone? Has he written to his Eleanor to tell her he's all right? Does he ever wonder what happened to that letter he gave to a nurse? Does he think it was lost? I hope somehow he knows that it wasn't, that it's safe, that someone is trying. The war grinds on, the guns still rumble, the ambulances still come. But here, in the quiet space behind the laundry tent, with the smell of damp earth and old paper, a different kind of battle is being fought. A battle against being forgotten. And for the first time since I found that crate, I feel like we might just be winning. July 10th, 1944. The days are getting longer again, or maybe it just feels that way because we are so tired. The push inland is intensifying, and with it comes a steady, relentless stream of wounded. We work until our hands ache and our feet feel like blocks of wood. Sleep is a precious commodity, snatched in a few hours of deep, dreamless exhaustion. I haven't had much time for the letters. The crate sits in the lean-to, a silent patient of its own, waiting for my attention. I visit it when I can, even if it's just for 5 minutes, to let it know it hasn't been forgotten. It sounds silly, I know, to personify a box of paper, but that's how it feels. I did manage to get one small victory. With Helen's help, we managed to get a handful of letters with complete addresses and units properly posted. We used our own precious stamps, saved from packages from home, and handed them directly to a sympathetic mail truck driver who promised they'd get into the system. It was only 5 letters out of hundreds, but it felt like a triumph. 5 voices on their way home. My request for Thomas Cavendish's information is somewhere. Davis says these things can take weeks. The army moves at its own speed, he tells me, with the weary air of a man who has been defeated by triplicate forms. I was reminded of the fragility of it all today in the most brutal way. We received a shipment of patients from a fierce engagement near St. Lay. The word was overflowing, the air thick with the smell of sweat and blood and the low sounds of suffering. I was moving from cot to cot, checking dressings, offering sips of water when I saw a familiar face. It was Paul, Lieutenant Paul James, the paratrooper who dreamed of a skyscraper office in New York. He was back. But this time, it wasn't shrapnel in his leg. He was on a stretcher, his face pale and clammy, his eyes closed. His uniform was caked in dirt and something darker. My heart seized in my chest. I went to him immediately, my professional training taking over. Paul, can you hear me? It's Nurse Peggy. His eyelids fluttered open. It took a moment for his gaze to focus on me. A faint, pained smile touched his lips. Nurse Peggy, the view. It's not so good this time. His injuries were serious. A gut wound, the kind we dread. We rushed him into pre-op. I held his hand as they prepared him for surgery. His grip was surprisingly strong. Abigail, he whispered. My girl, I know, Paul. I remember. I wrote to her last night. In my head. I always write to her in my head. His breath was shallow. Tell her I was thinking about the apartment. The one with the view of the park. You can tell her yourself, Paul, I said, my voice firm, believing it with every fiber of my being. You're going to be fine. He shook his head, just a tiny movement, the letter. In my pocket, could you? I nodded, my throat too tight for words. I patted down his torn and bloody jacket and found it. A single sheet of paper folded neatly, tucked in the breast pocket. It was clean, protected from the chaos that had surrounded him. I slipped it into my own pocket. I have it, Paul. I have it. He closed his eyes, his body relaxing a little. Thank you, he breathed. They took him into the OR then. I stood there for a moment, my hand in my pocket, feeling the crisp fold of the paper. The weight of it was immense. Another letter. Another last request. I couldn't lose him. Not Paul, with his dreams of skyscrapers and a girl named Abigail. The world needed his dreams. I didn't have time to dwell on it. There were too many others who needed me. I worked through the afternoon in a blur, my body moving on autopilot, but my mind was in the operating room with Paul. Every time the doors swung open, I looked up, hoping for news. It was late in the evening when Major Henderson finally emerged, his surgical gown stained, his mask pulled down around his neck. He looked exhausted. He saw me and walked over. Nurse O'Connor, he said, his voice low and gravelly. Lieutenant James is a tough one. We got it. It was close, but we got it. He's in recovery. The relief that washed over me was so profound, my knees felt weak. He's going to make it. He has a fighting chance. A good one? The major gave me a long, appraising look. He asked for you, in pre-op. Something about a letter. He did, sir. I have it. He nodded slowly. Good. That's good. Those things, they matter. He paused and then said something that surprised me. How is your other project coming along? The letters? It's slow, sir, but we're making progress. Keep at it, nurse, he said, and then he turned and walked away. His shoulders slumped with fatigue. I found a quiet corner behind the supply tent, and with trembling hands, I took Paul's letter from my pocket. I shouldn't read it. I knew I shouldn't, but after the terror of the day, after the fear of losing him, I needed to know that his dream was still alive. I needed the reassurance of his words. I unfolded the paper. His handwriting was surprisingly steady, elegant even. My dearest Abigail, I'm writing this by the light of a half moon, tucked away in a foxhole that smells of damp earth and tired men. It's a strange thing to be writing a letter you're not sure you'll ever send, but it makes me feel close to you. It makes this hole in the ground feel a little less lonely. I was thinking about our apartment again, the one with the view of the park. I've decided it has to have a fireplace, a big stone one, and in the winter, we'll build a fire and read books on the rug, and we won't even bother to turn on the electric lights. We'll just have the firelight. I can almost hear the crackle of the logs and see the way the light would catch in your hair. Don't worry about me, Abby. I'm carrying that picture with me, the one of us by the lake. It's a little bent and smudged now, but it's my good luck charm. It reminds me of what I'm fighting for. It's not for flags or politics. It's for fireplace light and the sound of your laughter. It's for a future. I have to go now. The sky is starting to lighten. Remember that I love you, always. Yours, Paul. I folded the letter carefully, my vision blurring with tears. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a fierce, protective joy. Paul was going to be all right. He was going to get his fireplace, his view of the park. He was going to mail this letter himself. I slipped it back into my pocket. I wouldn't post it, not yet. I would keep it safe for him, and when he was awake and strong, I would give it back to him. He could mail it when he was ready, with a postscript that said, I'm coming home. This is why I do it. This is why the crate matters. For every Paul who gets to deliver his own message, there are a dozen Thomas Cavendishes who may not get the chance. For every dream that survives, there are others that are lost, but they don't have to be forgotten. I went to the lean-to before turning in. I didn't sort any letters. I just sat there for a moment, in the dark, with the crate beside me. I placed my hand on its rough wooden side. We're still here, I whispered to the silent voices within. I'm still here, and I'm still trying. The rumble of the guns was a constant low drone in the distance. But in that moment, it was the quiet rustle of paper that I heard most clearly. July 18th, 1944, the reply came today. I was in the middle of changing a dressing on a young sailor with a burned arm when PFC Davis appeared at the entrance to the ward. He didn't often venture into the medical tents. The sight of blood made him queasy. "Nurse O'Connor," he called out, his voice hesitant. "A moment?" My heart immediately jumped into my throat. I finished tying the bandage, my fingers suddenly clumsy, and hurried over to him. He held out a thin, official-looking envelope from the Adjutant General's office. "It's about your request," he said, his voice low. "For Cavendish." I took the envelope. It felt heavy with portent. "Thank you, Davis." He nodded and scurried away, back to the safety of his paperwork. I couldn't open it there. I needed to be alone. I mumbled an excuse to Helen and practically ran to the lean-to. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tear the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a formal response to my request. To Nurse O'Connor, 42nd Field Hospital, from Records Department, Adjutant General's Office, request for personnel information, Cavendish, Thomas L.T., 10,876,532. Your request for next of kin information for the above-named soldier has been processed. L.T. Thomas Cavendish was transferred from the 217th General Hospital to a convalescent facility in Surrey, England on the 25th of June 1944. His condition was listed as stable. Next of kin is listed as Mrs. Eleanor Cavendish, wife. Address: 14 Willow Lane, Hartford, Connecticut, USA. I read it once, then again, and a third time. He was alive, not just alive, but stable, in a convalescent home in England. The relief was so sudden and so powerful, I had to sit down on an upturned bucket, the paper clutched in my hand. He hadn't died from the sepsis. He had fought his way back. Thomas Cavendish was going to make it. And I had a name and an address, Eleanor Cavendish. 14 Willow Lane, Hartford, Connecticut. I had done it. I had found her. But then, a new, more complicated problem presented itself. What now? He was alive. Sending her the letter now, with my note about personal effects, would be catastrophic. It would tell her he was dead. It would shatter her world for no reason. I couldn't send it. But I couldn't not send it. His words were too beautiful, too important. They were a testament to his love for her, written at what he believed could be the end. She deserved to have them, but she needed to receive them in the right context. She needed to know he was alive. I needed to write a new letter, a different kind of letter. I didn't wait. I went back to my tent, found a fresh sheet of my own paper, and began to write. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush. Dear Mrs. Cavendish, please forgive the intrusion of this letter from a stranger. My name is Margaret O'Connor, and I am a nurse with the 42nd Field Hospital in France. I am writing to you with wonderful news. Your husband, Thomas, was a patient under our care in early June. He was injured, and though his condition was serious for a time, I am overjoyed to tell you that he was transferred to a hospital in England, and according to the most recent information I have, is now recovering at a convalescent facility in Surrey. He is listed as being in stable condition. While he was with us, he wrote you a letter. He entrusted it to one of the nurses here to be posted. In the confusion of those first difficult days, the letter was unfortunately misplaced and never sent. I only recently discovered it among some old hospital effects. I am enclosing it here. I have not read it, but I held it in my care and felt it was too important a message to be lost forever. I thought you would want to have it knowing now that it was written in a moment of fear, but that it comes to you now as a testament to his love and his strength, and with the happy knowledge that he is on the mend. I hope this letter finds you well and brings you some comfort. Please know that your husband was a brave and kind man, and it was a privilege to care for him. With very best wishes, Margaret Peggy O'Connor. I read it over. It felt right. It told the truth, or at least a version of it that protected her from unnecessary pain. It delivered the letter with hope, not with grief. I carefully folded Thomas's letter inside my own, sealed it in a fresh envelope, and addressed it to Mrs. Eleanor Cavendish, 14 Willow Lane, Hartford, Connecticut. SA, I used my last precious airmail stamp. I carried it to the post tent myself and handed it directly to the sergeant in charge. I looked him in the eye. "This one is very important," I said, my voice quiet but firm. He saw the look on my face and nodded, placing it carefully in the USA mail sack. "It'll get there, nurse. I'll see to it." As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I was seeking. The first thread, the one that started it all, was now tied. Thomas's words were on their way to his Eleanor. They would arrive not as a ghost story, but as a love story. A story with a happy ending. I went back to the crate that evening with a renewed sense of peace. Thomas's journey was complete. Now it was time to focus on the others. On Billy and his dog, on Patrick from Chicago and his brother Mike, on the boy who drew a picture of his house. The crate seemed less daunting now. It was no longer a monument to loss, but a repository of journeys. Some of those journeys had ended, some were still ongoing. My job was not to mourn, but to connect, to be a bridge. I picked up a letter at random. It was from a boy named Arthur to his parents. He was worried about the wheat harvest back on the farm in Nebraska. He gave detailed instructions on how to fix the tractor if it broke down. I smiled. I would find Arthur. I would add his name to my ledger. I would learn his story. The war was still here. The suffering was still real. But in the midst of it all, in this small, quiet corner of France, I was building something. A memorial made not of stone, but of stamps and envelopes and hope. One letter at a time. July 25th, 1944. The rhythm of the hospital has changed. The front has moved further away from us, and the character of the wounded has shifted. We're seeing more illness now, more cases of trench foot and exhaustion, and fewer fresh battle injuries. There's a feeling in the air, a tentative, fragile sense that the tide is turning. No one says it out loud for fear of jinxing it, but you can feel it. It's in the way the orderlies whistle as they work, in the slightly less strained set of Major Henderson's shoulders. Paul James is sitting up in bed now. He's pale and thin, but the light is back in his eyes. I brought him his letter today. "I believe this belongs to you," I said, handing him the folded paper. He took it, a look of confusion on his face. Then recognition dawned. "You kept it?" "I told you I would," I said. "I thought you might want to mail it yourself. Maybe with a little addendum." He looked down at the letter, his thumb tracing the edge of the paper. "Thank you, Nurse Peggy, for this, for everything." He looked up at me, his expression serious. I meant every word in here. "About the fireplace, about the future. I know you did," I said. "And you're going to get it." He smiled then, a real genuine smile. "Yes, ma'am. I believe I am. It's these moments that fuel me. They are the antidote to the weariness." My work with the letters has become more systematic. With Ruth's advice, I've created a proper system. I have a ledger for names with full information, another for partial clues, and a third for the true mysteries, the letters with only a first name or a nickname. I spend an hour or two each day, when I can, cross-referencing with the admission ledgers. Davis has gotten used to my presence in his tent and even helps me sometimes, his initial skepticism replaced by a grudging admiration for my detective work. I've managed to identify a dozen more soldiers. I found Billy. He was William Jennings from Ohio. His dog Shep was indeed a collie. He was treated for a minor shrapnel wound and returned to his unit. I found Patrick from Chicago, Patrick O'Shea. He too had been sent back to the line. Knowing they survived, even if I couldn't send their letters to them directly, felt like a victory. I set their letters aside in a new pile. returned to duty. Their stories were still being written, but for everyone I identified, there were 10 I couldn't. The sheer volume is overwhelming. I've started to recruit more help. Helen is a constant. Mary-Beth, our youngest nurse, has started to help too. She has a sharp eye and a gentle touch with the fragile paper. She doesn't talk about crying in the dark anymore. This project has given her a focus, a sense of purpose beyond the daily trauma. Even a few of the ambulatory patients have asked what we're always scribbling in our ledgers. When we told them, they were fascinated. One of them, a corporal from Georgia with a broken arm, asked if he could help. He now sits with us sometimes, sorting through letters, his southern drawl a soft murmur as he reads out names and places. The crate is no longer my secret. It's becoming the hospital's project. Our project. A small community has sprung up around it, dedicated to this single, simple goal, getting the words home. I received a letter myself today, not from the army, but from home, my mother. It was full of the usual news, the garden, the neighbors, how much they missed me. But at the end, she wrote, "We are so proud of you, Peggy. What you're doing over there, it matters. You are showing them that we haven't forgotten them, that we're waiting." I cried when I read that. She had no idea about the crate, about the letters. She was talking about the nursing, but her words felt like a blessing on my other work too. She was right. It was about not forgetting. Tonight, as I write this, I am tired, but it's a good tired, a purposeful tired. The crate is still mostly full. There are still hundreds of voices waiting, but we've made a dent. We've sent some on their way. We've solved some mysteries. I think about Corporal Abernathy often, the kind-hearted clerk who started all this. I wish I could tell him that his project is in good hands, that his legacy of caring didn't die with him on that beach. If it's being carried on by a group of tired nurses and a few banged-up soldiers in a field hospital in France, I think he would be pleased. The war is not over. There's still a long way to go. But here, in our little corner of it, we are fighting our own battle. A battle of memory, a battle of connection. And with every letter we identify, with every envelope we seal, I feel like we are winning. The guns are quiet tonight. All I can hear is the rustle of the canvas in the breeze and the soft, even breathing of my friends as they sleep. And in my mind, I can hear the faint, hopeful rustle of 100 letters waiting their turn to go home. August 1st, 1944, something miraculous happened today. I was in the clerk's tent, going through a ledger from late June, when Davis called my name. He was holding another official envelope, but this one wasn't from the records department. It was smaller, softer, an airmail letter. "This came for you, Nurse O'Connor," he said, his eyebrows raised. "From the States." My first thought was that it was from my mother, but the handwriting on the envelope was elegant and unfamiliar. The return address made my heart stop. 14 Willow Lane, Hartford, Connecticut. It was from Eleanor Cavendish. My hands trembled as I took it. I barely made it to my lean-to before I tore it open. The letter was written on fine, lilac-scented stationery. "Dear Miss O'Connor, I do not know how to properly thank you. Your letter arrived 2 days ago, and I have read it over and over again, each time with fresh tears of relief and joy. You cannot imagine the darkness of these past weeks. I had received a telegram stating that Thomas was wounded and missing in action, then nothing. The silence was the worst part. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of my apartment and the constant, gnawing fear. I had almost given up hope, and then your letter came, like a lifeline. To know that he is alive, that he is safe in England, recovering, there are no words. You have given me back my future, and his letter. Oh, his letter. To read his words, to know what was in his heart in that moment, it is the most precious gift I have ever received. Thank you for your kindness, for your compassion, for taking the time to find me and to send it on. You called it a testament to his love and strength, and that is exactly what it is. I will cherish it always. You said in your letter that it was a privilege to care for him. I want you to know that it is a privilege to know that there are people like you over there, people who see the man behind the soldier. You are an angel, with my deepest, most heartfelt gratitude. Eleanor Cavendish, P.S. I have already written to Thomas at the convalescent home. I told him all about you and how you saved me from despair. I read the letter 3 times, sitting there on my upturned bucket. The lilac scent, a strange and beautiful contrast to the smells of mud and disinfectant that usually surrounded me. Tears streamed down my face, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated happiness. I had done it. I had truly done it. I hadn't just sent a letter. I had sent hope. I had pulled a woman in Hartford, Connecticut, out of the darkness and given her back her future. Her words echoed in my mind. You have given me back my future. This was why. This was the answer to all the exhaustion, the frustration, the overwhelming scale of the task. This one letter from this one woman made it all worthwhile. I shared the letter with Helen and Ruth and Mary-Beth that evening. We huddled together in our tent, passing the lilac-scented paper between us. Helen cried. Ruth smiled her quiet, knowing smile. Mary-Beth looked at me with something like awe. See, Peggy? Helen said, wiping her eyes. I told you. You have to try. This success has electrified our little group. The patients who help us heard about it, and they redoubled their efforts. There's a new energy around the crate. It's no longer a sad duty. It's a mission of joy. We are not just tracking down names. We are delivering miracles. I've started writing to Eleanor Cavendish in my head. I want to tell her about the crate, about Abernathy, about all of it. I want her to know that she is a part of this story now too. That her gratitude has fueled us for the next 100 letters. The war feels very far away in moments like this. The grand strategy, the movements of armies, they all fade into the background. What remains is the human connection. A letter from a husband to a wife. A thank you from a stranger across the ocean. These are the things that are real. These are the things that last. I went to sleep that night with Eleanor's words in my mind. You are an angel, a no angel. I am just a nurse from Iowa with a stubborn streak and a growing addiction to the sound of the mail truck. But if being an angel means delivering hope, one envelope at a time, then it's a title I'll wear with pride. August 10th, 1944. The news is everywhere. It's on the lips of every orderly, in the pages of the crumpled newspapers that make their way to us, in the triumphant voice of the BBC announcer on Major Henderson's radio. The Allies have broken out of Normandy. The front is moving fast. Paris, they say, will be liberated soon. There's a palpable excitement in the air, a giddy, almost disbelieving joy. We are winning. We are really, truly winning. The mood in the hospital has shifted accordingly. The wounded who come in now are often cheerful, despite their injuries. They talk of victory, of going home by Christmas. The despair that hung over the first weeks of the invasion has lifted, replaced by a bright, buoyant hope. Our little letter-writing project has flourished in this new atmosphere. We've become a proper assembly line. One of the patients, a former librarian named Private Collins, has taken over the ledger work with an academic's precision. Another, a boy who was a clerk in a department store before the war, has perfect handwriting and addresses all the envelopes. Helen and Mary-Beth sort and read for clues. I coordinate and liaise with Davis and the Postal Service. We've sent out over 50 letters now, 50 voices sent home. Some to families of men we know survived. Others to families of men we know did not. Those are the hard ones. Writing those accompanying letters is the most difficult part of my job. Finding the words to tell a mother that her son is gone, but that his last thoughts were of her, is a heartbreaking responsibility, but it is also a sacred one. The responses we've started to get, like Eleanor Cavendish's, tell us that is a necessary one. The crate is half empty now. It's a visible sign of our progress. Every letter we remove feels like a weight lifted, a story honored, a promise kept. I was thinking about Corporal Abernathy today as I watched Private Collins carefully noting a name in the ledger. I thought about how this one man's act of kindness, his refusal to throw away these pieces of paper, had rippled outwards. It had touched me and Helen and Ruth and Mary-Beth. It had touched Paul James and Private Collins and the department store clerk. It had touched Eleanor Cavendish in Hartford, and through her, it had touched Thomas recovering in England. And who knows how many others their story had touched. It was a chain of humanity stretching across an ocean and a war. It was a light that Abernathy had lit, and we were all now carrying it, making sure it didn't go out. I found a letter today that I'm saving for last. It's at the very bottom of the crate. It's not in an envelope. It's just a small, square piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times it's soft as cloth. The handwriting is a child's large, blocky, uncertain letters. Dear Daddy, I miss you. I am being good. I fed my rabbit. Mama cries sometimes. I drew you a picture of the house. Come home soon. Love. Susie. There was a crayon drawing of a house with a smoking chimney, a stick figure girl, and a lopsided rabbit. There was no last name, no return address. Just Susie. It is the ultimate mystery. The one that might be impossible to solve. But I'm not giving up. I'll add Susie to my ledger. I'll ask every patient who helps us if they know a little girl named Susie with a rabbit. It's a long shot, but so was finding Thomas Cavendish. The war is not over. There is still fighting, and there will be more casualties. Our work here is not done. But for the first time, the end feels visible, a real place on the horizon we are speeding towards. And when this war is over, when I pack my bags to go back to Cedar Rapids, I know what I will be taking with me. It won't be souvenirs or medals. It will be this ledger, this record of names and stories. This proof that in the midst of the worst mankind can do, there is still kindness. There is still love. There are still letters making their way home. The guns are silent tonight. The sky is clear, full of a million stars. In the distance, I can hear the soldiers singing. It's a hopeful song about seeing the lights of home again. I close my diary and blow out the lamp. In the darkness, I can just make out the shape of the crate sitting in the corner of the tent. It's quieter now, less crowded. Good night, I whisper to the remaining letters. We'll find your way home tomorrow, and I know with a certainty that feels as solid as the earth beneath me that we will.